quick stream here. I need to move this window, whoops, over to the front. So I'm actually looking at my camera rather than looking to the side because the screen I'm looking at is over to the side. And yeah, I'm just chitter chattering to give a little bit of time, since this wasn't a pre-announced stream, to build a little bit of an audience. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes, this sleeve is the one that's all, how do you like my okay, I'll know, right? Okay, I'll know is right. All right, as always, I don't like I'm getting all fussy, aren't I, about the way my shirt is laying. But this, as always, is a participatory, I need to move this out a little, a participatory show. Hi, friends. I wanted to talk a little bit about what was going on in Vermont. Now, Vermont is not a state party that I had been, at least not recently, directly involved with helping. When things first started going south there, I was asked for advice. And because of that, I have a bit of a relationship with the people there where I was advising them for a while, and I'm not any longer, but that does I'm not any longer officially. They had retained a different parliamentarian upon my recommendation, because I was too time strapped to be able to devote the time to help them. So I referred them. Oh, well, Carlin, I know they've been trying to stage another coup in New Hampshire. Like, we don't know the details, but we knew this was coming for a while, didn't we? So back to Vermont for a second. I'm sure we'll have plenty of shows about New Hampshire, unfortunately. Oh boy, this is not going to be a good convention, this national convention. So back to Vermont. So I was advising them in the beginning. I was stretched way too thin. Another parliamentarian I had found out about was available to assist. So I referred them over to the other parliamentarian, who actually has much higher qualifications than I have. I just recently achieved my registered parliamentarian certificate. I'm listed on the National Association of Parliamentarians site as a registered parliamentarian, but they have yet to officially inform me of this fact. So I wrote them and said, "When were you planning on telling me? We're going to look into that." Okay. I also wrote them to ask them when on the new, because I ended up just taking the old credentialing exam, because the new one, it's still 7 months ago that I took the last module and they still haven't graded it. Thank you so much for the super chat. Even before I started grifting, before I even started grifting. Thank you, Fidalgo Files. And Kelly is right. Moderates claim to be professional and strategic, but you prove what you get when you order the DNC and the RNC on Wish. Yeah, you order libertarianism on Wish, and this is what you get. So back to Vermont, what I can say is somewhat limited because of the relationship I had before I handed off representation to another parliamentarian. But I can talk about generalities and things that are public knowledge, things that differ and things that are the same. And what prompted me to want to discuss this tonight is there's a guy who used to be my friend. He's now on my block list. I don't even remember the name. Already like water off the duck of a back. Off the duck of a back. Off the duck of a back. Okay, that's going to be my new expression now. Off the duck of a back. Just like when I say I'm ahead with my chicken cut off. So I've already forgot. Joe, I think his first name was Joe Edmundo, maybe. But whatever, unblock, because I was watching these conversations and I'm like, he doesn't seem like he's asking questions in good faith, but I'm not going to assume that. So I'm going to try to answer his questions. And when I did, those types of discussions where somebody says, this situation looks like X, or situation Y looks just like situation X. And then you painfully in detail describe to them the critical differences between Y and X, and they act like you never said anything at all and just repeat, this situation Y looks like X. It's like, you don't have to agree with me. but at least interact with the rebuttal instead of acting like there was no rebuttal given at all. It's ridiculous. Pietro, you can't just look at their bylaws. You have to look at state law as well. Vermont is different. Each state is different. Something I learned very quickly and painfully is that you can't take the experiences in your own state as typical of experiences in other states. For instance, like with Arizona, I'll be talking tomorrow with Brandon Slayton on the Arizona bylaws and their interaction with state laws. So you can't just look at, I'm not going to disagree with you. The Vermont bylaws are terrible, but they're not quite as terrible as they appear on first blush. They're still terrible. But there's a lot that was going on in this situation that has to do with state laws that doesn't have anything to do with their bylaws. And if you don't know their state laws, it's talking in they still would have controversy, Pietro. I'm sorry, you're incorrect there. Believe me, I've been spending like 5 months on this rather than 5 minutes. I'm not saying you've only spent 5 minutes, but relatively speaking, it's almost like that. But we might pull up something here. I want to pull up on another screen their bylaws, Vermont Libertarian Party bylaws, but they are terrible, without question. Now, I'm going to first deal with the claims, and the Y is like X, the specific claim that this person who I've just decided who was trolling because there was no good faith effort to interact with comments was, this is just like New Hampshire. Really? Name one similarity. It's nothing like New Hampshire. It's nothing like Delaware. It's nothing like like Massachusetts. The only similarity involved is Mises derangement syndrome. In New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Delaware, the people who were trying to change the leadership, well, not Massachusetts. Let's take Massachusetts is also completely different from Delaware and New Hampshire. Delaware and New Hampshire, the people who were trying to change the leadership did it all in a very underhanded way. They either hid notice, they had secret meetings, that sort of thing. Nothing was done on the up and up. And it was all in contravention blatantly of their bylaws when they could have done it the right way under their bylaws. Massachusetts, they knew a purge was coming. So the members exercised their rights to change the leadership lawfully. And when I use the word lawfully, I mean under parliamentary law. I'm not speaking about, law like the lawyers. And then they all got expelled. Vermont is way different. Vermont, I will say right up front, because it's obvious to everyone, it's not as clean as it is in New Hampshire, Delaware, and Massachusetts. And part of that is because of their bylaws. And I'm going to read a post that I had made on my page, on my Facebook page, once I can figure out where that's at. Go to Safari. And I need to switch from my public figure profile. I don't like the way Facebook makes things so complicated, because I want to say where I'm coming from here. And anyone who thinks Archie Flower has a leg not to stand on, obviously he's standing, to complain from, that he has any kind of principled position to complain from, you're a fucking barking moonbat if you think that. So let me read this post. But I wanted to give people the opportunity to talk to me about this if they wish to. So I'm looking over here because I'm reading this post, and it says, a very trollish person in one of the delegate groups. I know, I repeat myself because those delegate groups are almost all trolls. is making some absolutely stupid claims about what happened with the Vermont Libertarian Party. I am somewhat limited in what I can say on the situation, as I advised them meaning certain members of the Vermont Libertarian Party early on, with another parliamentarian taking over due to time constraints on my part. So I can't get into confidential strategy and the like, but I can address, however, things that were obvious and known to all and give my take. The situation in Vermont is completely different from any other situation we have seen, and to make comparisons to other states other than a broad view of Mises derangement syndrome is beyond ignorant. And the Vermont situation, I will show my parliamentary heresy, in which I am a libertarian first and a parliamentarian second. And I am very, very open about that and disclose where I differ. I put 2 main points of heresy and forgot to edit that to 3 when I came up with the third one. 1, I don't agree with Aaron Adams that we are obligated to follow immoral bylaws as libertarians, unless it was open and apparent all along, and to those who put the bylaws into place that they were immoral, in which case I would hope no libertarian would join such a group. 2, I don't believe bylaws are a suicide pact. Bylaws presume good faith actors, and when there is obvious bad faith, then people need to do the best they can with the intent, if attempting to follow every jot and tittle would victimize the members without recourse. This rarely happens. It usually happens because there are very shitty bylaws. This did happen, in fact, in Oregon. In Oregon, I'm differing from what I posted here. I'm expounding. Oregon, they made an amendment to their bylaws that made their bylaws impossible to follow. What were the members to do? Do they just all just shoot themselves in the head because they fucked up their bylaws? No. They had to try to follow the intent of their bylaws the best they can, and then see who the libertarians in their state approved of. Both groups alleged that they did that. When a ballot was sent out to the libertarians in Oregon, they overwhelmingly approved one group over the other, and that's the group I sided with. But nobody was able to follow the bylaws in Oregon because they fucked them up beyond belief. So let me continue here. Nearly always, there is always a way to do what needs to be done with even within very shitty bylaws, and even with very, very bad actors. And any exception would have to be extraordinary. And I understand that people can and do disagree. I will maintain that Vermont is one of these extraordinary circumstances, kind of like Oregon. You had a very, very bad faith actor. And unless you're going to argue that bylaws are a suicide pact, you are a barking moonbat. Number 3. And I know people do disagree. Maybe I shouldn't have worded it that way, because I understand there will be people who say, if the bylaws say you have to shoot yourself in the head, then you have to shoot yourself in the head. I don't agree. I never will. I think that situation is exceedingly rare, though. Number 3, principles of justice trump bylaws when it's obvious that those who wrote the bylaws and those that did not amend them each time that there was opportunity to didn't explicitly intend for them to abrogate certain avenues of justice voluntarily. These are my principles, and I also readily admit I'm a parliamentary heretic when it comes to that. And I do advise everyone I help that whenever I will disagree with established parliamentary law, I will say, I just disagree here. This is what it says. P.S. I thoroughly disagree with Richard Brown's opinion given on this matter, and I disagree with him on parliamentary grounds, not on my heresy. And if you think 2 parliamentarians disagreeing is unusual or a big deal, I have a bridge to sell you. Parliamentarians are as bad as libertarians or Christians arguing about whether or not the Spirit proceeds forth from just the Father or from both the Father and the Son. That is the reason for the schism between the East and the West in the church. Something, I'm sorry, as stupid as that. PSS. Anyone who thinks Archie Flower in any way or any manner has any ground to complain here on grounds of ethics or justice is a fucking barking moonbat. Okay. Now, what are the issues in dispute? First of all, the whole one, how do I even word this? I want to word this in a correct way. I am not one of those people who say the whole purpose of a political party is to elect candidates. It's not. It certainly isn't for the Libertarian Party. We also have an educational purpose. However, Part of our purpose is to be an actual political party that elects candidates and is on the ballot. Archie Flower had a duty as state chair to do certain things under Vermont law, and he purposely did not. As far as I'm concerned, through his inaction, he resigned from that position. That is not the position the Vermont Libertarian Party took, but that is my point of view on the situation. He absolutely refused after months and months of asking him very nicely to call. And what laws am I referring to? In Vermont, you have to organize a certain number of towns. He was refusing to recognize the organization of certain towns because he didn't like the leadership. And you have to organize, I think it is 10 towns in order to maintain ballot status. Because Archie decided, I will only organize towns or assist in organizing towns if it's leadership that I agree with, not whether they're libertarian or not, because in this dispute, as far as I'm concerned, there's no dispute as to whether they were libertarians. Certainly libertarians under their bylaws, was willing to let Vermont lose ballot access over this. So he refused to call the meeting required by state law in order to maintain their ballot status. In other words, Archie was willing to torch the Vermont Libertarian Party and not do what his job is as chair of the party under Vermont law because he had Mises derangement syndrome. He was asked multiple times. If you want my opinion, the state committee was far too patient. They gave him every chance to do what he was supposed to do. In my opinion, they should have removed him in October. This is what you call being nice, and then Archie using their niceness against them. You can't win for losing. They were very nice to Archie and very charitable to him. If I were on their state committee, I'd have been moving to remove his ass for dereliction of duty, because he absolutely was derelict in his duty and turned off registration on the website. So Archie turned the Vermont Libertarian Party into his own personal little club. He then means that he went actively against the purpose that states in their bylaws. I mean, actually, not, oh, I don't like these libertarian ideas. For instance, state mission, 1, to recruit and run candidates for local, state, and federal offices under the Libertarian Party banner. You can't do that very easily if you purposely torture ballot access. Number 2, to promote libertarian ideas and policies in Vermont. That is extraordinarily vague. I'm not even going to argue that one. You could say you can do that without ballot access. I agree that is, but you know, when you're not allowing people to join, I don't see how you're promoting libertarian ideas. The membership was disabled, as Olga says, at least a year ago. Number 3, to recruit activists and donors. And you certainly can't do that if you don't allow people to join the party. And Olga is absolutely right. Hindsight is 2020. They were trying to be nice. Probably if they had to do it all over again, they wouldn't be quite as nice. You want to know what? If I had to do my suspension motion all over again, I wouldn't have been so stupid to tell the LNC that Stephen Nicola was going to leave so that they could sneakily bring in David Sexton to stab Stephen and me in the back. But you want to know what? I would rather be guilty of being too nice and suffering the consequences. I mean, if the worst thing somebody could say to me is that I was too nice in that situation, okay, I guess I can live with that. And I did suffer the consequences. That motion wouldn't have passed if I wasn't so honest as to tell them that Nicola was leaving. And then the same thing here. Archie was never kept in the dark about what was going on. He was told multiple times, we are going to call a special meeting and appoint a chair pro tem to handle this meeting if you refuse to do your duties. None of this was done behind his back. He was kept in the loop the entire time and virtually begged to do his job. If you think that is at all similar to New Hampshire, I do not know how you don't walk into walls face first. And you're not that stupid. If you can figure out how to use the internet, you are not so stupid to think those two things are the same. You are a thoroughly dishonest person if you think those two situations are remotely similar. They are not. The guys in New Hampshire woke up one morning to find out that they were just no longer the party, that Joletta Jarvis just ran off with the party. That is not at all even remotely what happened in Vermont. Archie knew everything, and he could have done the right thing. And his actions not only would have left them having ballot access lost, it also would have kept him chair for life. He wasn't having any intention about having any kind of elections in which he would be not elected. Now, Pietro earlier brought up that the bylaws didn't have certain provisions for elections. They had a custom about elections. And unless the custom contradicts the bylaws, the custom is authoritative. That is why I said you can't just look at their bylaws and think you know the whole story. If you haven't interviewed people in Vermont, if you haven't taken a look at Vermont law, please, please don't go all over Facebook with some strong opinion because you're talking a little bit out your ass. The way it worked there, and Olga is free to correct me, being a Vermont libertarian, because I've been messing with so many parties right now that I might get some facts confused, was that on the odd years, they would do their reorg, and on the even years, they would elect a new board. The state committee got an extension that the state did not have to give them of a month or two to do their reorg. So it all ended up on an even year. So they did their reorg and their officer elections, just as they always have. Please, people, do not have an opinion on things. I mean, I'm not saying don't have an opinion, but don't have such a strong opinion when all you know is what you've read on Facebook. You haven't talked to any of the people. You haven't talked to a parliamentarian. And of course, parliamentarians will disagree. I disagree with Richard Brown here. This isn't a slam on Richard Brown. But I will say that the lady who was helping the aggrieved members of Vermont is more qualified than Richard or I. Richard and I are the first level of credentialing. We are registered parliamentarians. The lady who was assisting Vermont is a professional registered parliamentarian. That's a level above. There's not that many of them. Not that credentials mean everything, but I'm just saying, as far as professional training goes, she is way more qualified, on paper at least, than Richard or I. I can imagine, Pat, the emails you've gotten over it. I've seen some of the emails, by the way. I know the LNC, like, not you, Pat. You know, when I say the LNC, I pretty much mean the bad ones. They think they're this insular little club of which nothing leaks. They are leakier. I mean, oh my God, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff I know that I probably shouldn't know. So, continuing. Some things that Richard did not mention in his opinion and aren't mentioned multiple places when we're talking about this is that Archie was required to call, I believe it was a minimum of one meeting a year. There was another one I was looking at that said 4 meetings a year. I'm getting confused on my states. But Archie did not call meetings as he was supposed to do. He was just letting the party die. He was a chair in name only. And this is what I mean by bylaws are not suicide pacts. When the chair is not doing its job, unless you want all of the libertarians in Vermont to suffer because you're just going to throw your hands up and go, well, he's the king. Yeah, I thought it was 4 per year, Matthew. Then I'd say you're being unjust to the members. Do you think that when whoever originally passed these bylaws and the people who didn't amend them this year, do you think that the intent was that it would be just peachy and okay to have a chair who just refused to call meetings? No. That obviously not the intent. And I know intent under strict parliamentary law does not come into play unless there's an ambiguity. But to me, justice is much more important. And the interests of the members of Vermont is much more important. And let me tell you another big difference between New Hampshire and Vermont. Let's say the membership of Vermont is roaring mad about what happened. None of them have been expelled. Any single one of them can come to the next convention and vote everybody out. What did New Hampshire do in order to keep their little coup? They expelled everybody. Matthew, I do think Archie misled Richard Brown as well. With all due respect to Richard Brown, he should stay out of affairs of the affiliates. He represents the LNC. He does not represent the affiliates. Just like if I were still secretary, I'd be staying out of this. Now, I do assert, according to the delegates, I am, but I no longer have the conflict of interest because I'm not in the loop with the LNC because they have illegitimately removed me. If I was still within the circle of confidence of the LNC, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. And with all due respect to Richard Brown, I don't think he should be writing opinions for state affiliates unless the LNC gave him express permission to do so. And I never saw any vote for that. But that really isn't my business. That's just a personal opinion of mine. And he was misled on certain key facts. He didn't know that Archie was refusing to call meetings. He didn't know that Archie was letting them lose their ballot access. He didn't know that Archie knew all of this was coming. Now, it is once per quarter. The committee shall meet a minimum of once per calendar quarter. You're correct, Matthew. It's just I've read so many bylaws lately, I didn't want to misspeak. Now, the state committee shall serve as the ruling body of the Vermont Libertarian Party. The state chair is not the ruling body. So it is my position that if the state chair is not fulfilling his duties, that the state committee has the absolute obligation to go over his head. Period. Otherwise, they are not being the ruling body. And Latina Libertarian also is correct. The officer's term. We'll look all of this up. I'm going to go through. The problem is these comments disappear. So remind me of that one. I should have my little notepad here. So I do have a notepad. So let me not forget. We're going to look at the 2-year thing. So what the state committee did was not improper. Where the conflict comes, and there's a conflict in their bylaws, in my opinion. Let me write down this 2-year. It says the state committee shall serve as the ruling body. That means that they have to make sure that the Vermont Libertarian Party is running according to its purposes and in the best interest of its members. But it also says that the state chair may call an extraordinary meeting of the committee. But what if the state chair refuses to call meetings? There you have the conflict. The bylaws give the authority to call meetings to the state chair. But the bylaws also say that the buck stops with the state committee. What is the state committee to do if the state chair is refusing to call the meeting that will allow them to keep their ballot access? You have a conflict in the bylaws. What is in the best interest of the members and the purpose of the party is for the state committee to take control. I believe Richard Brown is absolutely and utterly incorrect here. You had a conflict in the bylaws. You have to use the interpretation, which doesn't render it absurd. It is absurd to say that the state chair can effectively kill the party by refusing to call a meeting. That is absolutely and utterly absurd. Of course, I will grant this. Perhaps what they just should have done is removed him in October. Perhaps they were too nice. But guess what you have to do to remove him? Call a meeting. If only Archie can call a meeting, do you think he's going to call a meeting to remove himself? No. You do not have an interpretation of the bylaws was absurd. When that happens, you have to follow the spirit and intent as close as possible. And I maintain that is exactly what happened. Archie's making it like he was completely innocent. Basically, Archie's response when he was asked to call this meeting towards the end there was, "You got to talk nicer to me." He was just, it was absolutely and utterly ridiculous. You've all seen his behavior on social media. I am not telling you anything that is not public knowledge. Second here before I forget. All right, we're just gonna. I want to just flip through these here a second. I do think he abdicated his chairmanship. That's why I said I believe he has constructively resigned. I don't think that's the position of the Vermont Libertarian Party. That's my personal opinion. One second here. I'm just flipping through something. These are okay. It says a convention shall be held every even numbered year. And let me see here. Yeah, and the terms are not defined in here, Olga. It's been a while since I looked at these, but their custom certainly is that they were 2-year terms. So unless we shall say that Archie was supposed to be chair for life, the state committee did what it had to do. The state committee acted in the best interest of the members of the party, and none of it was done on ideological grounds. It wasn't done because we don't like what Archie believes. Archie wasn't expelled. Anyone can come to the next annual, every 2-year convention, and the terms are detailed in state statute. That's where I got that from. That's why I was saying to Pietro that you can't just deal with the bylaws, that Vermont's very unique. A lot of it is in state statute. Thank you for reminding me of that. It's been a while, Olga, since I've looked at your bylaws. As you know, I handed this off a while ago. So just looking at the bylaws is completely inappropriate. Then what Richard's saying, that the notice was deficient for the special meeting. That the notice said selection of a chair pro tem. Here's where I think Richard is just being ridiculously pedantic. Since Archie wasn't calling the meeting and made it clear he wasn't going to be there, obviously there was going to have to be a chair pro tem for that meeting. So obviously the notice wasn't a notice that they were going to have a chair pro tem for that meeting. Archie was also informed what was meant by that. I believe that when you say you forgot to dot an I, when everyone knew what was going on, is having the members serve the rules rather than the rules serve the members. Archie knew what was going to happen because he was told it. He gave the proper number, as Olga, who's Latina Libertarian, has said, has given the proper number of days. To claim that they didn't use enough of the magic words in the notice is ridiculous. And that appears to me what Richard is hanging his hat on, because it just said the selection of a chair pro tem. Obviously, everything was about the special convention, the reorg meeting. That was the whole purpose of the extraordinary thing. If you want to say that they were not artful enough in how they worded their meeting notice, you are basically saying only parliamentarians can be on committees, because no matter what, you're going to nitpick the notice. That notice was better than half of the notices that happen on LNC meetings. Archie knew exactly what the notice was for. And Mr. Brown did put a disclaimer in his piece that he hadn't really read the law. He didn't know all of the situations. He shouldn't have given an opinion on the situation, in my opinion. But with the state chair refusing to do his job, which is then in contradiction to the very purpose of the party, with the state committee being charged in the bylaws to be the ruling authority, they had to do everything they could to maintain the purpose of the party within the intent and spirit of their bylaws, with a chair that was refusing to call a meeting. What they did was the least, like, I'm trying to analogize to Walter Block when he talks about when you're defending, somebody's trying to attack you with a knife, or attack you with that's even a wrong thing, because a knife is lethal. Let's use the stupid crying Nazi Chris Cantwell thing. Chris Cantwell used to say, if someone steals a paperclip, which is your property, you could kill them. No, you can't. It doesn't take lethal force to repel somebody from stealing a paperclip. Avenging Pineapple. No, this is not a communist channel. This is probably the exact opposite of a communist channel. Don't let the pink hair fool you. I'm about as anti-communist as you get. So that's what they had to do, what they had to do within the obvious intent and spirit of their bylaws. If you're going to hang your hat on the fact that the bylaws say that the state chair is the only one who can call meetings, but he's refusing to call meetings, the state chair is for all intents absent from his duties. And the state committee had to do what the state committee had to do. Is that perfectly 100% squeaky clean? No. Is it the only avenue that preserved the purpose of the party and protected member rights? Yes, it is. And it's nothing like those other states. Archie was doing his job. He wanted to stay in his job to continue to do nothing. Archie is free to rerun again. And like other states, I am sure that this will be settled at Reno as well. And if Archie believes that what happened was so contumacious to libertarian principles, he is free to petition the next LNC to disaffiliate Vermont. Just like plenty of people are going to be asking for that if justice isn't served in Massachusetts. The only reason nobody can ask that now is because bad actors are taking advantage of this 6-month window. And I think he will be laughed out of the LNC meeting, but he has every right to ask that. He was doing nothing. He was actively preventing the Vermont Libertarian Party from being a political party. Lesson for other state affiliates. If your state affiliate is doing this, then you need to just stop. Don't be nice. Remove your chair. Because apparently in Wyoming, this is going on. Apparently, Wyoming has turned off memberships. I don't even think there's a party in Wyoming anymore. I love Apollo. I am constantly sending donors over to the Frontier Project. But what I've heard is that Wyoming has become simply a shell front organization for the Frontier Project. And if so, that is wrong. That is a disservice to the libertarians in Wyoming. And whoever is just the puppet chair in Wyoming should then be removed. Turn on memberships on the Wyoming state. And you want to know one reason what made me finally believe these rumors is they were supposed to get a appointee to the platform committee. They never responded to any of my emails as platform committee interim chair asking who their appointee was. You want to know how many states would have loved to have had that seat? And nobody still yet has been appointed from Wyoming because it's not a real party. And the Libertarian National Committee is doing shit about it. In Vermont, they did, not the LNC, the members took charge and did something about it. And you want to know what? You Wyoming members, you need to take charge and do something about it. I will always support the Frontier Project. I do not support the Frontier Project hijacking the Wyoming party for its own purposes. Avenging Pineapple, I do very specific subject matter. I do open Q&A other times. This is about Vermont, and that's what we're sticking with here. But I understand Twitch is a little different because I get a lot of Twitch people who want me to just do a Q&A. So I think I'm going to schedule one of that soon because I appreciate your desire. And I'm normally a YouTuber, and I'm really finding out that Twitch is so much different from YouTube. So please look for that soon. And if you have specific issues, I've invited other Twitch people to shoot me an email at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com to set up a little discussion thing that we'll just do on Twitch to try to service the Twitch crowd, because I understand my kind of YouTube format isn't fitting in too well at Twitch, and I get a lot of Twitch people mad. So, if you want to talk about whether libertarians or Nazis are enough, I would love to have that discussion, actually, because I think that'd be a really easy thing to dispel. And thank you very much for DJelf7 for the super chat. I super appreciate it. All super chats do go to support my campaign. So hopefully, and I'm willing to see, Fidalgo file loved my use of the word contumacious. That's a word that needs to come back into regular use, doesn't it? It's a wonderful word, contumacious. With Cameron, LP Texas isn't going to remove Whitney. No, because she is doing you might not agree with her performance. You vote her out then. Removal should be reserved, and I say this as an allegedly removed person, to dereliction of duty or crimes. Archie very clearly had a dereliction of duty, because I do not advocate for removal very often. But Archie is one I would have advocated for removal on. So I assume a lot of this will be solved in Reno. But anyone who is trying to claim that what happened in Vermont is the same thing, or similar, even by analogy, to anything that has happened so far in any other state, they are not they either are very, very ignorant, and ignorance is curable. But if somebody's ignorant or bad faith if they engage with your points. If they don't engage with your points, then they're a bad faith. If they go, oh, you just raised a point, I would like to answer that point. Or, oh, you just raised a point, that's information I didn't have before, let me think about it. Then they're just ignorant. But that guy on that delegates group, bad faith actor, absolutely refused to engage anyone's points. Gene, you are correct. The Sarwarks were not elected as delegates to Reno or alternates to delegates to Reno. In smaller states, it's a lot of people don't get elected as delegates because there's very limited spots. But every state gets 50 alternates. To not even get elected as an alternate is pretty damn bad. From what I remember correctly, Mr. Sarwark got 5 votes, and you need 30-something to have a majority vote in order to be an alternate. Milo, how do I get elected? You know, just so you know, I have a parrot named Milo. So I'm very partial to that name. And before any freak out and go, oh my God, she named her parrot after Milo Yiannopoulos. I've had my parrot now about 15 years, way before I ever even heard of it. I actually named my parrot Milo after a friend of mine. It wasn't like a personal friend, but it's a guy I knew on a parrot forum who used to do this really funny skit called, I forgot his name now, but it was the X and Milo show. Milo was the bird, and Milo got attacked and murdered by a hawk one day, and it broke my heart. So the next parrot I got, I named Milo after the murdered Milo parrot. So anyway, my parrot's named is Milo, and he says his name's so cute. He goes, Milo, Milo. It's so cute. How do you get to elect me in Reno? Come to Reno and vote for me to be vindicated as secretary. A lot of this shit wouldn't be going on if I were still on the LNC. I like to say, you know, there's a lot that I couldn't do parliamentary wise to help these affiliates if I were secretary, but I don't think it would have ever even got to this point. I can do a lot more for affiliates as secretary than I can do on the outside, but at least I'm not helpless. There's something I can do no matter what. If I'm not reelected, I can help this way. If I am reelected, I can help other ways. So in any event, you know, it'll help. And listen, come on. Anyone who says, okay, I'll know. I got this shirt at Goodwill today, and I'm like so thrilled. All right. Anything else? Objection speculative. I know. I love that Fidalgo. I still got to extract that. I've been so busy. Yeah. So that's where we're at. I wanted to clarify that. Obviously, there are details here I didn't say that I can't, that were confidential discussions between me when I was assisting some of the members in Vermont. Internal strategy, I can't discuss. That's confidential. So everything I've discussed is pretty much public knowledge, and anyone can figure it out for themselves. And I do expect probably the Reno delegation will be challenged, and I mean the Vermont delegation will be challenged, and I expect that the right delegates will be seated for one reason and one reason only, not just because it's the right thing, but because one advantage to having Archie mad at you, Archie is lazy as fuck and he's not going to do a damn thing. He didn't do a damn thing for the past year, but sit on social media and bitch. He didn't do any real work. All right. I'm just going to give this a few moments to see if there's anything else to say on Vermont. But, oh, there is one more thing. I looked up all those citations of Richard Brown, where he was talking about administrative duties not being transferable. Hey, JJ, and you'll probably disagree with me here, JJ, but that's okay. Now we'll have 3 parliamentarians who disagree, but you outrank Richard and I too. JJ's like the OG. So I looked up Richard's citations for the administrative functions, where he said are not transferable to the chair pro tem. The chair pro tem didn't. He did and he didn't call the reorg meeting. He did, but it was ratified by the state committee. And the state committee is who is in charge of to rule the party. They're the ruling authority of the party. I don't like that word rule, but that's the word their bylaws use. But all the other citations that Richard gave, none of them mentioned, none of them said that calling a meeting is an administrative function. Arguably, it's an administrative function, but every single citation he gave talked about appointing, that when the bylaws say that the chair gets to appoint members of committees, that privilege doesn't fall to a chair pro tem. Every single citation he gave, that's all it said. And he extrapolated that out to say that a chair pro tem couldn't call a meeting. Like at a meeting where the chair pro tem was elected, couldn't, with a vote of the board, call another meeting. And I just think Richard is absolutely and utterly wrong there. If you go to here, where he is talking about and a reason I have the 11th out is because Vermont's is still under the 11th and not under the 12th. So his citation of the 12th saying it added a new section is completely irrelevant because they're not under the 12th, they're under the 11th. And I don't even think that helped the case anyway. But administrative duties is on page 456 of the 11th. It's so easy to read an opinion letter. I highly encourage you, when you read an opinion letter, go read the actual citations to see if it's saying what the opinion letter says it says. And I'm not saying that Richard Brown was misrepresenting anything, because he wasn't, but he was extrapolating. And I think he needed to make that clear, and he did not. On 456, administrative duties of the president of a society. Most times, though I'm not sure it's every time, Roberts needs to fix this or define this, but it tends to use the word president, I guess, because a lot of societies have a president who isn't necessarily the presiding officer at meetings. So they make a distinction between president and chair. But I think Roberts needs to make clear in the state law required the meeting, JJ. Not the bylaws. The bylaws are very scant, but because the Vermont Libertarian Party is governed more by statute than by their own bylaws. And the statute, in order to maintain ballot status, which is the whole purpose of a political party, whole purpose, wrong thing, somebody's going to quote me out of context, is the whole purpose of the political wing of the political party. There's an educational wing as well. I always have to clarify that. Certainly a major purpose of a political party is to do politics. And I would agree with you there, but I don't think calling the meeting, I disagree on the administrative thing, but that's okay. We arrived at the same conclusion from different avenues. So it says all of the duties of the presiding officer described above relate to the function of presiding over the assembly at its meetings. To me, you don't even have a meeting unless the meeting is called. Everything above, which is talking about including the chair pro tem, I do think includes calling a meeting. I do not classify calling a meeting as administrative. And nowhere does it explicitly say that. In Roberts, it's administrative. It says, in addition, in many organized society, the president has duties as an administrative or executive officer. I think there it is talking about things that have nothing to do with parliamentary procedure. Just like it said it goes on to say that. It says, but these are outside the scope of parliamentary law. And the president has such authority only insofar as the bylaws provide it. I think this is talking more about primarily about Richard put a big disclaimer in his opinion letter that he did not know what the Vermont law said on it, and that the Vermont law would override anything he said. Basically, he put in a huge fucking good thing, a big disclaimer on it. But I also don't think Richard should be writing opinions for state chairs without the permission of the Libertarian National Committee. But that's between him and the LNC. I'm not getting into that. I'd be saying that even if he wrote an opinion I agreed with. I think he's going to get himself into trouble with that, because this LNC, he'd make a better living probably advising states than the corrupt LNC, but that's not my business. Okay, so it says the president has duties as an administrative or executive officer, but those are outside the scope of parliamentary law, blah, blah, blah. We already said this. And then it goes on to give some examples of appointing members of committees. That is the only example that is given. So it is up for interpretation whether calling a meeting is an administrative function. I don't believe it is. I just don't. And there's no specific spot in Roberts that says it is. And if the president or chair, whatever you want to call them, never calls a meeting, obviously they are preventing the organization from running. And that's why I said the bylaws are not a suicide pact. He's abdicated, completely abdicated. And you're trying to tell me there's absolutely nothing you can do? No, no, no. Standing rules aren't parliamentary, though. The parliamentary rules are the special rules of order. Anyway, just saying, I just don't agree there. But I think you and I do agree that if this is something that was covered by statute, that the ruling authority, and it does explicitly state that the ruling authority was the state committee, that the state committee had to take action. And the action they took might not have dotted every single I, but it dotted it as close as it possibly could and preserved the purpose of the society. No one is expelled. Every single member still has all of their rights. And if they are unhappy, they can take care of it. Unlike New Hampshire, what Gilletta tried to do. Unlike Delaware, what McVeigh did. And unlike, that is a good point, JJ. I'll think about that one. You raised a good point. Not sure I agree, but I'll have to think about that one. But in this case, with it having to do with statute, the state committee had to deal with it. So there are my answers about the leadership change in Vermont. But one thing I will never say is that it was 100%, 100% clean when it came to the bylaws. I never claimed that. But it was the only one that preserved members' rights. And it was the only one that kept the party doing what the party was supposed to be doing and kept it as a ballot qualified party, which is one of our major goals. The only thing that was not followed to the letter was that Archie Flower, who refused to call meetings, isn't the one who called the meeting. And if you think that one thing makes everything okay that he did, that he refused to let people join the party, that he refused to call a reorg meeting, then we're just not in the same universe. All righty, let's see if there's anything else since I just remembered that. And I want to look up one other thing here. Do you, just because I'm curious, I'd like to read it, JJ. Do you have that? So yeah, meetings, hour, and place of standing rules. So 89 and 575. I'm just curious about reading that. Not that I don't think you're right, because I believe you are. I just want to see the wording on that. Yeah, because I think that was on the freaking text. Okay, I got it. I don't need you to give me that. Yeah, members of the state committee did call the meeting. That's exactly what happened. They called the meeting and they appointed a chair pro tem to call the reorg because of their statutes. But I don't think anybody says that everything was done absolutely perfect, because Archie made that impossible. He refused to do what he was elected to do. He would be complaining if they called an extraordinary meeting to remove him, because he would say he's the only one who could call the meeting. And I don't think anyone would think that would be okay either. that he would be unremovable. They then ratified the calling of it. It gets a bit complicated. I don't think there's any problem here, JJ, though I'm not going to say that everything was done absolutely perfectly. It was impossible because of what the actions of the state chair. And I don't believe like the little nits are a suicide pact, as I said before. What is the purpose of the organization? What is the purpose of in the best interest of all the members, as long as no members are being expelled, so that they can't overturn this at a later date. But they were losing their party status, but for the actions of the state committee. State committee is ultimately correctly. And one reason, JJ, I'm not second guessing and I don't know all the procedures, they had a PRP representing them. So I am confident that it was done correctly. I don't know all the details because, again, I wasn't involved, but they did have a PRP representing them. And I'm not going to second guess her decisions, and I don't even know all of her advice. I was just asked to be kept in the loop as to when the meetings were, what the outcomes were. But once I turned all that over to her, I was no longer involved in that part of it. But I trust that she did, at least under her opinion, what was correctly. And of course, parliamentarians disagreeing is nothing new. I did chug a Mountain Dew for the memes, but it was a diet Mountain Dew that makes it even worse. I'm about to go chug another one. All right, everyone. I think I may end up doing another live stream immediately after this one, because there's some lying going on. This does relate to Vermont, but not direct. I don't want to say not directly, because it does directly, but not solely. It has to do with a whole lot more than just Vermont. And it has to do with lying liars lying about the quote unquote takeover. And I feel this is something that absolutely needs to be addressed, because I am tired of the lying liars lying, because that's what liars do. Tomorrow, I'll be talking with Brandon Slayton, I believe on his show, about the what happened in Arizona and Chris Lucchini's interference in Arizona. Richard, I've already argued my point as well as I'm going to. I'm arguing it as an outsider, and I'm being very circumspect in what I have to say, because I was not their parliamentarian, and I am not going to step on the toes of their parliamentarian. They had a PRP advising them, and I'm confident in her abilities. I'm doing this strictly as an outsider with information that's publicly available. And the regular chair was not calling any meetings. And this was required by statute. It was not merely a bylaws issue. This got into issues of Vermont state law. All right, everyone. And again, Richard, I'm sure it will not be the first time we disagree. And yeah. And we probably will agree more times than we disagree, even though we've been disagreeing quite a bit lately. Such is life. The real question is, do you think the Spirit proceeds from the Father or from the Father and the Son? All right, everyone. I hope you have a good night. I'm probably coming back like in 5 minutes to talk about the lying liars lying about the takeover. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.